he will die and he will come back again and again and again and again and again over hundreds, perhaps infinitely. But every time he does, he'll be a little bit different and he will lose his identity. He will not be himself. His body will be animated and moving around, but it won't be him. And he finds that to just be like ultimately horrifying. And he has this like existential moment where or this almost like sort of existential atheistic moment where he questions like, if does God actually even exist? How could God do something like this? This is horrible. Like, what sort of God created this thing? Okay, I'm going to talk about two books that have gotten me back into reading science fiction and really have gotten me excited and more interested in a genre and finding new writers than I have for quite a long time. So before I begin, I should say that for me, these books and what I'm really enjoying in science fiction are interesting characters and settings. And settings doesn't just mean place, but it could also mean time and the sort of like if there's some kind of political atmosphere or something like that that is portrayed in the book. The next, of course, would be well-written prose. You know, lots of show, don't tell, but also prose that's styled well, edited well, very well thought out, very economical prose. And the last, of course, will be good characters that bring on intellectual and emotional hooks that keep me engaged as a reader. So that first book is Neon Leviathan. I almost got the wrong title there. Neon Leviathan by T.R. Napper. T.R. Napper is a fairly new writer, very new to me. I was able to pick this up on Kindle Unlimited, so if you're a science fiction reader that also has Kindle, you could grab this. It's a fantastic deal. I learned about this from a grim, dark discourse, or a Discord that I'm a part of, because I was kind of dabbling in fantasy and had come across the Discord channel, and some people had recommended this as dark science fiction. What this is these are 12 loosely related short stories in cyberpunk stories, kind of cyberpunk subgenre of science fiction. These are set in the year 2090, and beyond that, they're not interconnected. And I actually really liked that, and I think that brings me actually to the first thing that I really liked about this book, is that T.R. Napper is just a great writer. And for me, a great writer can write an excellent short story. And as someone who's studied writing and has studied literature and has tried very miserably to be a writer, I know that short stories are very difficult to write. It's very hard to tell a complete story from start to finish, and it's very hard in a short number of pages to bring a character into a problem and arrive at some kind of resolution of that problem in a short story. Very, very difficult thing to do. So, but Napper can do that, and he does it very well. I think he's a very, very gifted writer, and I think we're very lucky to have him writing in a subgenre like this. I mean, cyberpunk subgenre, typically not a subgenre of science fiction with a lot of great writing in it. I think a couple of minutes on the Amazon lists will kind of reveal that. I'm not here to trash other people's writing. But I really like these stories. They're all set in futuristic settings. Actually, I should say there's one more thing that ties these stories together, and that's that they're all the characters in the stories are on the brink of something. And they're set in a world that's also on the brink of something. You always get the sense that something is about to happen or something has just happened, and the ramifications of that are starting to roll out. And what we get then are these stories, some of which are very exciting, some of them are very thoughtful, but we all have these characters that are encountering or are dealing with or in the midst of conflicts, and they're having to find resolutions to deal with that. And some of those conflicts and problems are things like addiction. We get characters that are addicted to video games, characters that are addicted to drugs, or both. We have characters that are addicted to love, that just want attention. We have characters that have PTSD from conflict, from war. We have characters that are kind of dealing with statelessness. We have places that are being ravaged by war. We have economic hardship. And so these are all very realistic problems. You know, typically when we think about science fiction and when we think about cyberpunk, the problems that the characters deal with are not generally realistic. But these are all very realistic problems. These are problems that we have today. And it's interesting to read that we may still have these problems in the future, and that actually things that happen in the future could make these problems, you know, even worse or even more difficult to deal with. It's interesting too that he's got a lot of speculation. I mean, as by nature, you have to have some speculation in science fiction. His speculation is not so much about technology or, you know, high-tech, you know, gadgets or high-tech weapons or things like that. His speculation tends to be more based around political events, particularly in some of the stories and or I guess in the world that this is set in. China has become aggressive and has taken or has tried to take or is in the process of taking land from its neighboring countries, and that has some very real impact and effects on, you know, Vietnam and neighboring countries there. It has some real effects on Australia. It's worth noting that T.R. Napper is Australian, and he did work in Hanoi, Vietnam, for a number of years. So he's pretty well versed, and when he sets his stories in Vietnam, they're very realistic. I lived in Vietnam for quite a long time, and I can say he's done a fantastic job of getting that setting and getting a lot of the nuances and characteristics of those places and the people there. But I think really, like I said before, what at the heart of all these stories and what makes them work so well is that he is taking, like I said, realistic people with relatable problems and portraying them. And also almost all of his characters are outsiders, and they're sort of trying to find an existence in this world that to us seems very strange, and to them it's just, you know, it's just the everyday world. So he's really a great writer, really worth checking out. I really enjoyed this, and this really made me feel like, okay, I need to start reading more science fiction again. So the second book that did that for me was this book, Hyperion. This is a reread for me. I think I've mentioned this in another video before. Yeah, this is a reread for me, and it's always been on my mind about this book. Not so much the events that happen in this book, but in the events that happen in the following books. This is the first of 4 books. And I saw it available to buy online. I live in Shanghai, and I found some online booksellers, and I found this, and I thought, I should go for it. Because I know this is a great read. It's a good page turner. It was a cheap buy, so I just went for it. And I'm in the middle of the second chapter right now. I haven't finished reading it, but like I said, it's a reread. I do remember it pretty well. And that's one of the great points about this book, is that it really sticks with you, or at least it has for me. It's really stuck with me. Like I said at the beginning of the video, great writing at the prose level, sentence level, everything is great. This book in particular has a really interesting structure in that it's structured after the Canterbury Tales, where we've got 6 characters who each have their own story to tell. And in telling that story, they're able to sort of paint a picture of this world that they occupy, this futuristic world, and also sort of tease out threads of the narrative and move the narrative along. The first chapter of this is just wonderful. It's just fantastic. It's so good. It's The Priest's Tale, and it's a great mix of science fiction, horror, psychological thriller, mystery, adventure. It pretty much just nails everything. And I'm wondering if it's maybe possibly the strongest part of the book. I read a little bit of criticism of it, and some critics had said that it is possibly the strongest part of the book. And in my mind, it was the one that stuck with me the most. It's the character that sticks with me the most, possibly because he's undergoing this horrific body transformation. I'll give a quick rundown on it. I don't want this video to get so long. Basically, the priest in this book is one of several pilgrims who have been chosen to travel to this planet Hyperion. Each pilgrim has visited the planet before, had some kind of interaction with it, left the planet, and is now going back. And the planet is important because there's a monster there called the Shrike, which is a beast that is not understood at all. It's speculated that it can occupy different times and places at the same time, that somehow one entity can do that. And also when it does that, it can go on this massive killing spree and just kill hundreds of people. So it's this very dangerous thing. The priest has been to the planet before because he guided another priest who was excommunicated to the planet. That priest was excommunicated from the Catholic Church for falsifying some research about possible Christian remains on another planet. So he was excommunicated and sent to this planet. And that priest went to Hyperion to study some early settlers who had crashed on that planet, were separated from the rest of the sort of galactic world or empire, whatever you want to call it, for quite a long time, and had kind of become their own society. I'm trying to give an abbreviated version of this because it's a really complex story. But what makes it so striking is this priest eventually, he travels through this horrifying landscape of electrical storms and strange creatures and strange plants and things like that. It's all very dangerous, all very treacherous. So it's quite an adventurous story. And his guide is killed. Not the original priest. The original priest drops him off at the spaceport, leaves, and says, "I'll be back in 8 years," or something like that. His local guide is killed. Eventually, he finds this tribe. They're kind of like a lost tribe of people. And he finds that they've become physically changed, and he's wondering if it's some kind of evolution. And he finds that their mannerisms and things are a bit strange. They're definitely, they're human, but they're not really normal. They're not like us. They're not normal, quote unquote. What he finds is that they've built a chapel in a cave. And inside this chapel, there are these glowing sort of coral crosses. They call them cruciforms. They're crucifixes. How can I fast forward through all of this? Some things happen. One of the people in the tribe are killed, and he follows the tribe as they bring that dead body into this cave, and he watches over a period of 3 days as the body decays, and he finds that it has one of these crosses inside the body. And then that cross regrows this person's entire body. And in this process, he also realizes that these people have changed very much from what we would call human. So they can't reproduce. Certain organs and body systems are dramatically changed or altered. And he begins to realize that some of them almost kind of like Down syndrome, and that they seem to have maybe some cognitive issues going on, some developmental issues and things going on. Inadvertently, he has also agreed to have one of these crosses put inside his own body, which means that he will now become one of these people. And basically what the whole point of all that is that this group of people cannot die. They will always be regenerated. because they have this weird crucifix, cruciform thing inside their bodies. And the priest has it now. And he realizes that. And he realizes that he will die and he will come back again and again and again and again and again over hundreds, perhaps infinitely. But every time he does, he'll be a little bit different, and he will lose his identity. He will not be himself. His body will be animated and moving around, but it won't be him. And he finds that to just be like ultimately horrifying. And he has this like existential moment where or this almost like sort of existential atheistic moment where he questions, like, does God actually even exist? How could God do something like this? This is horrible. Like, what sort of God created this thing and allows it to happen and flourish? And I just find that really interesting and pretty deep for something that's supposed to be space opera science fiction. I'll give the end of the story here. I'm trying to speed up through this. The original priest who guided him to the planet goes back to the planet to try to find him. Eventually finds him and finds that this priest, this excommunicated priest, has crucified himself in an attempt to completely, truly kill himself. But of course, he can't because he's got this cruciform inside of himself. And out of curiosity about what's going on, the priest who guided him here doesn't really understand what this crucifix is, takes it out of kind of the skeletal remains, and then that priest who has crucified himself finally dies. His body finally, ultimately decays very rapidly. But that cruciform now goes into the other priest's body, and he's had to live with it. And he has had to live with this horrifying knowledge that when he does die, he will regenerate. And that will begin this endless process of regeneration and of slowly wiping away his own identity, basically. And he has to sort of live with that horrifying knowledge. So that to me is one hell of a story, and that's just one chapter in this book. And this is just the first of 4 books. So, I think that's pretty amazing. That's one chapter, and that chapter in and of itself could be its own book. And that's, to me, that just had everything that I loved about good writing. It was all right there, and I'm just completely hooked on science fiction now. And I want to strongly encourage you, if you're watching this, to, as I've said in other videos, to try to branch out with your reading and to open yourself up to other kinds of reading, and to be aware that you can find the qualities of writing and reading that you like in one genre, you can find it in another genre, and you may actually find it even more enjoyable when you do find it in that genre. So keep your mind open and try to read widely, and try to really find new writing and new reading that you really love. So there you go. This has been kind of a long video. If you're still with me, I want to say thanks, and I really appreciate it. Please hit the like button. Please hit subscribe and let me know that you enjoyed this. And please leave a comment if you are a science fiction reader. Why do you like science fiction? And if you are not, but you've had similar moments of finding great writing, finding great storytelling, please leave a message and let me know about it.